Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday to you all. It is a delight. I'm so glad that you're here to join us for daily devotions through Redeeming Life Fellowship. And today, as we're going to continue moving through our Revive School reading plan that's been leading us through the major prophets, yesterday we finished up the book of Ezekiel. And so that means today we're going to offer a brief introduction and a peer into the book of Daniel. So today our reading plan is going to would focus on Daniel chapters 1 and 2. But before we offer today's devotional, I wanted to make a few general observations about the book of Daniel and try as best as we can to have the sort of frame of mind that is going to help us capture the message and the relevance of a book like Daniel for us today. The book of Daniel is actually it's a remarkably profound book, and within our relatively short period of time, there's no way for us to tease out all of the really fascinating details in a book like Daniel. And it also means that the book is actually weighed with a lot of theological controversy that scholars have debated ad nauseum over several years. I mean, ever since basically the book was ever written, people have debated about it. So, but I don't think that that's going to stop us. It should not stop us from being able to hear at least clearly the message of God and his sovereignty and his purposes that he desires to bring about in not only among his people but through his people. And but getting back to the book of Daniel is actually only 12 chapters long, and it is actually pretty neatly divided into two halves, where chapters 1 through 6 deal primarily with Daniel's experience of living in captivity in Babylon, and the second half, chapters 7 through 12, deal with his visions that God had shown him while he was in exile in Babylon. And so that, strictly speaking, the book is not arranged in a total chronological order, but rather they're two chronological halves, so that if you were telling the story of Daniel by his experiences, you get the first half, and if you were telling the story of Daniel's visions, you'd focus on the second half, so that it's almost like here's Daniel, part A is the experience, part B is the visions, and that they fit together in that regard. So it's not here's chapter 1, there's a vision, chapter 2, here's a vision, chapter 3. They're supposed to be sort of read in tandem or read in parallel in that regard. But about Daniel, he is a very interesting character because he was a part of a caravan of exiles taken from Judah rather, into Babylon when he was about the age of 15. So still at a very young and formidable age. Formidable, that's the right word. Or is it the right word? Let me check. Yes, formative is the right word. Age 15, very formative age indeed. It's helpful, at least from my vantage point, to think about what it must have been like at age approximately 15 to be uprooted from your family, your home, your land, your city, and to be transported to a whole nother land with new gods, new languages, new cities, and not only are you living there, but that you're in bonded servitude to the powers that are above you. And that's what happens when you're taken as an exile into a dominating empire like Babylon. And so one of the questions I would pose to you, Luke, Glenn, Bryce, Faith, B, Tom, is how do we live godly lives in a pagan society? Or to maybe put it more aptly, for our purposes, how do we live godly lives in a godless society? The point I think that we want to at least, the big idea, one big idea that we want to try and wrap our heads around is that whenever we can feel the pressure, as it were, from a dominating hand of a superpower that controls the values, that controls the commerce, that controls the worship, that controls the norms and the standards of the day, when you can feel that hand, that powerful hand that dominates persons and people groups, whenever we feel that kind of pressure, that's the pressure just to survive. And I tend to think that most of us, if we feel as though that we cannot fight it, we'll have the pressure to do one of two things. The first is to retreat. That here's this power that dominates, and we don't want to be under that power, so the best solution is to run away. That's one option. Another one is to assimilate. That is, here's the powers that be. I'm going to do everything I can in my words, in my attitudes, in my standards, in my morals, to assimilate to those of the powers that are above me, so that I can, as quickly as possible, get in lockstep with those powers, so that I won't just merely survive, but I'll actually hopefully thrive under their powers, because I've become one of them. That I'll do everything I can to be on the inside of the superpower, to ascend in those ranks. That's the other temptation that we have when we're faced under that kind of pressure. But then there is a third option, and perhaps we can call it the Daniel option. That is not to retreat, not to assimilate, but to engage. In other words, the life of Daniel is a living example of what Jesus would talk about and would preach about centuries later, about being salt and being light. So that you don't retreat from the corruption of the culture, but that you engage it. You don't assimilate it, but you involve yourself within that culture. You maintain godly character, and you reflect the light of God's glory from the inside of the superpower, so that you can be a living demonstration that reflects the goodness and the glory and the love and the majesty and the power and the justice of God in the midst of a corrupt society. What we can certainly learn, at least one thing that we can learn from Daniel, that when we feel the pressure of a dominating superpower, we feel that pressure to survive, that we don't retreat, we don't assimilate, but that we engage, and that we continue to walk according to a godly standard of living, and to maintain godly character in the midst of a fallen world. So that's just one idea, one concept that I want you to be able to hold on to as you're reading through, especially Daniel chapters 1 through 6. And so, but let's jump into Daniel chapter 1. I want to offer just a very brief devotional. And one of the things that I think gets lost in some of the English translations is that that in Hebrew, as it is still true in some cultures, where the names that are given are names that have meaning. And the meaning of those names is a little more clear in their original languages. And that the names of the four primary characters in Daniel, chapters 1 through 6, are Daniel, of course, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To us, to our ears, those just sound like foreign names. That they are personal names, and Daniel happens to be one that's still used fairly often. But Hananiah, Mishael, which is a Hebrew root personal name where you get Michael. They're very closely related. And yeah, Azariah, I haven't looked at the whole lot of like the list of popular names, but not a very popular name, I'm sure, by any stretch. But those names have meaning. I'd like to share them with you. With Daniel, Daniel, that name means God is my judge. And Hananiah is a name that means the Lord shows grace. So fascinating within these two friends, these two companions who stick close to each other in mutual support and help and encouragement in exile in Babylon. You see how their names are complementary in that God is judge, and he is also the Lord who shows grace. And then there's Mishael, whose name means something like who is like God, that there is nobody who is like them. And then Azariah, which means the Lord has helped. One of the things I think is really fascinating to me is that as these are Hebrew names that tell something about who God is. And once they can see and hold fast by their names who God is, that their identity is something that's informing their character. And as it forms and shapes their character, they have the power to be able to do the right thing in the sight of God against temptation to just assimilate. And we're going to see that here in chapter 1, and we're going to focus on verses 8 through 17. And it says, actually, let's begin in verse 6. Chapter 1, verses 6 through 17. This is talking about listing some of the exiles, the particular exiles who were brought from Judah into Babylon. It says this: among these were some from Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. These young men with a lot of potential are brought in and selected to enter into the king's service. And to do so, it's strategic on their part to give them new names and to wipe away their history so that these young men can be shaped and formed, named into their own image, to be given new names, so that that who they are is who the people of Babylon say that they are. And in order to do that, they have to wipe away what their original names and what they mean. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. Just there's the pressure that they're already feeling to assimilate, to say Babylon has won, they're the dominating superpower, let's let go. We won't believe anymore that God is judge, or that the Lord shows grace, or to reflect, as Mishael would reflect, who is like God, or to remember the times that the Lord has helped, as Azariah would say and remember. Here's the temptation to wipe all of that away, Um, but they don't, as we read. It says, but Daniel, still Daniel, resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. It's not immediately clear why or what it is about the food and the drink that Daniel saw that would defile his conscience, to say, no, God tells me to do this, but you're feeding me this, so I have to abstain. I would say the closest thing, and reading this in light of the rest of the book of Daniel, is probably that the food and the drink, in some way or another, are not just offered as nourishment, but as an act of worship to the pagan gods, so that by coming into Babylon, being given new names, and new names that have associations with the many gods of Babylon, that by doing so would constitute an act of worship to these pagan gods. And Daniel knows, no, God is my judge, and I'm not going to commit an act of spiritual defilement by eating this food sacrificed to other gods. This is certainly in accordance with the messages that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians chapter 8 and chapter 13, if I'm not mistaken, about food sacrificed to idols. Daniel is serving as one of those men who insists that worship to God is of utmost importance in his life. Verse 9, now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. This servant, this attendant, who is in charge of the health and well-being and raising and forming and shaping these young men, knows that if he changes the official diet of these men, that this constitutes a flagrant disobedience of the king's orders, and that he would be executed if he fed him anything different. And it says, but Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please, test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. In this small test, this relatively small test, God responds in favor and says, to these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. People who are rising in the ranks of the Babylonian Academy. Very impressive in their work and in their own right. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. Now, the important thing that we want to walk away from in this case is that for Daniel and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, what we know throughout the entire book is this is not the only test of their character, their godly character, to capitulate, to lower their standards in order so that they can survive. But that bigger and more serious and more difficult tests were going to be coming ahead of them. It seems clear in my mind that the strength of their character to face the big trials were possible because they took the little trials seriously. That God could honor their faithfulness in the big tasks because they were faithful in the small tasks. Believe me, the day is going to come when the pressure to assimilate or even to retreat is going to be great. But the test of your character begins with the small things, with the little tests. So I encourage you, be faithful in pursuing God and maintaining godly character in the small things, so that we all will be prepared for the day, the real day when testing comes, so that at that stage we won't back down, but that we will seek God and trust God and put Him first in all things, and that is going to be how we're going to be salt and light in a fallen world. So thank you so much for taking the time to hear what Daniel has to say to us. If you haven't, do please subscribe to the YouTube channel so you get daily notifications about to help follow along with the reading plan. And I look forward to seeing you here on Wednesdays, Sundays. I look forward to growing and living as the people of God, as He continues to change us, shape us, mold us into His image and likeness, so that we can be the sort of people who God uses to reach the communities of Whitley County. So God bless you. Take care, and I will see you all next time.